Alright guys, so in this video, I'm going to be taking a look at some of the biggest blowouts in college football NCAA history, mainly focused on more recent games because, of course, back in the mid-1900s, you had random teams that weren't even, Division II, Division III facing what would be considered FBS teams. It's kind of ridiculous, although I will be including the famous Cumberland Georgia Tech game, the biggest blowout in college football history, happening in the early 1900s, 4 years after the Titanic sank. And it is funny, ESPN did a little graphic like this: 222-0. Cumberland had negative 42 rushing yards. They were 2 of 18 for 14 yards and 6 interceptions. They somehow turned the ball over 15 times. This is like Pee-wee players facing a college football team. It's almost indescribable how ridiculous this is. Georgia Tech, almost 1,000 rushing yards, didn't attempt a single pass, had 0 turnovers and 32 rushing touchdowns. It's literally playing Madden with 15-minute quarters against rookie difficult. Actually, I'm not even sure you could do that in that scenario. It's just ridiculous. 222-0. That game, the biggest blowout in college football history. But just taking a look at some more recent ones. Of course, this was just last year, the national championship, TCU taking on Georgia. I want to say Georgia was only like a 14-point favorite in this game. Everyone thought Georgia was going to win it. But if you remember the narrative coming into this game, Georgia was coming off a very close loss to Ohio State, a game in which they could have lost easily. TCU had beaten Michigan as 7-point underdogs. Max Duggan was kind of like this Heisman contender underdog. And TCU did score a touchdown to make it 10-7. They were in this game early, and then it just completely got out of control. And it's a horrible look for college football when your national championship game ends 65-7. Georgia didn't even beat FCS teams that bad. Like 65-7 is a game against, a typical game for like Georgia against a team like UMass or Gardner-Webb or something like that. The fact that we saw it in the national championship, it is ridiculous. But yes, there is that game that happened last year. This game happened back in 2019. This was the semifinal game with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow was ridiculous this year. One of the greatest college quarterback seasons we've ever seen. And the score really doesn't do it justice. So the final score of this game was 63-28, but LSU just stopped trying after the first half because they had 49 points in the first half. Joe Burrow's numbers: 500 passing yards, 7 touchdowns. I want to say Justin Jefferson had 4 touchdowns in the first half. It's just completely ridiculous. This is Oklahoma, Lincoln Riley defense just getting destroyed and just not a competitive game at all. 42 points with 4 minutes left in the second quarter. How do you score 49 points in a single half in a playoff game? Oklahoma, just a terrible defense there. And then LSU, I mean, they were a complete juggernaut that year. And then this game was just ridiculous. This was back in 2021. CJ Stroud, Ohio State, they stopped trying after the first half. They were up 49-0 against the number 7 team in the country, Michigan State, late into the season. And CJ Stroud's final numbers, this is in one half: 32 of 35, 432 yards, 6 touchdowns. He had 3 incompletions and 6 touchdowns. You can't even do that on a video game. It's just, like, this is ridiculous. 49-0, 49 points in one half. And then the Buckeyes just, that was the week before Michigan, I think, the week before they faced Michigan. That was before they lost to Michigan even once, because now, they've lost 3 straight games. But 2021, going into that game, they were on a crazy winning streak against them. And that game against MSU, that was the Kenneth Walker team. They were solid. I think Kenneth Walker was kind of injured going into that game, but they were really overranked in general, going into that game with 1 loss. Just completely overmatched in terms of talent. And Ohio State has been destroying Michigan State like the past 5 years. Every game's been a complete blowout. After Michigan State and D'Antonio kind of had Ohio State's number, they went back and forth a few of those years. MSU at one point was like 3-3 in their last 6 games against Ohio State, and recently MSU has struggled more. Even this year, when they did have a really good season, they got just annihilated by the Buckeyes in one single half. This is just a random game from 2016 I found. Memphis won 77-3, and Memphis dropped a 50-burger in the first half. They very easily could have scored 84 or 91 points. If I was Memphis, I mean, you don't want to run it up, but it would be kind of cool to win like 91-3. It would just be more memorable but they ended up winning this game 77-3. This was a home and home with Bowling Green, kind of a weird thing, but Memphis at this point, they were a team that was kind of decent throughout the mid-2010s, and they still are. I mean, they won 9 games this season in a decent mid-major conference. The next game, it is the 78-0 game, the Rutgers-Michigan game of 2016, and this was when Rutgers, they were like 3 years into the Big Ten. Everyone knew they were horrible, but this game was next level. It was like Rutgers was a Division III program. Michigan was bringing in, it felt like, walk-on running back after walk-on running back, and Rutgers just couldn't stop them. It was like, okay, it's almost like you're facing freshmen from high school. It was like peewee level. Michigan was really not trying to run the score up at all. They were just running the ball the whole game. Spate, the quarterback, Wilton Spate, remember him, 100 yards passing, that's it. Rutgers, I mean, they were just terrible, man. They were 1 of 8 for 6 yards. They couldn't even attempt passes because they were so bad on offense. 78-0, and Michigan just kept running it and scoring rushing touchdowns with walk-on fourth-string running backs. It was completely ridiculous, and that is really sad for the Big Ten, in all honesty. Moving on, this is just a random bowl game I found. The Armed Forces Bowl. Army, a triple option team who doesn't throw, dropped a 70-burger on Houston. And Army's quarterback attempted 3 total passes, so they scored 70 points by attempting 3 passes. It is completely unheard of. It's ridiculous. 70-14, they won this game. And yeah, I mean, if it's the Armed Forces Bowl, you can kind of understand it, considering Army is involved in it. And then going back, these are just some games from a while ago. You had this game in the 1960s. Houston won this game against Tulsa 100-6, and you think, oh, okay, whatever. This game was played in the Astrodome, funny enough, but you think, all right, whatever. It's just an old-time 1960s game. Look at the box score to this game. They were only up at one point in the third quarter, 24-6. They were up 24-6 in the third quarter. They end up scoring 27 unanswered points to end the third quarter, 49 points in the fourth quarter. That it would just never happen. There's just how do you score 49 points in the fourth quarter after you're already up by like 50? I mean, my goodness. And the weird thing is they scored 100 points, but only had 762 total yards of offense. You would think they would have a lot more. Tulsa did commit 6 turnovers, and it was just an annihilation in that one. And then this is another one that happened early in the season in the 1990s. Ohio State thoroughly throttling Pittsburgh when they were ranked number 7, 72-0. The Buckeyes won that game, and it was on ESPN. You can even see the little ticker, the final score, 72-0 there. That was when Ohio State didn't even have their renovations. Yeah, I'm looking at their stadium right now. That is interesting. And then you do have 2 other playoff games involving Big Ten teams, and I'm actually going to defend Michigan State and Ohio State. Looking back on these games, obviously, Michigan State, that 2015 team that knocked off Ohio State with the backup quarterback, the field goal that they made at the end. They face Alabama, and this was a close game in the first half. Michigan State was actually going in to score late, possibly to make it 10-7 at the half. Connor Cook throws an interception, and Alabama ends up winning 38-0. Michigan State did have over 200 yards of passing. It's one of those games where everything went wrong for MSU. Certainly, they're not better than they weren't better than this Alabama team, but it was just very unlucky as well. Like, a more realistic score in a game like this would have been 31-14, which would have looked a lot better than 38-0. And then the Ohio State Clemson game. I vividly remember Malik Hooker. This was 2016, the crazy year for Malik Hooker when he had all those interceptions. The dude had a pick 6 that one of the Ohio State defensive linemen knocked down. So he had a free pick. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen. But yeah, Ohio State with JT Barrett, it was so bad towards the end there. But then they stuck with JT Barrett again in 2017. Clemson wins this game 31-0, and another shutout for a Big Ten team in the playoff. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.